Hello, I'm Scott Clover, and you're listening to the Intuitive Energy Podcast. This podcast series is about intuition, healing, and creating new energetic patterns that benefit you in your daily life. In my private practice, I help people heal from a diverse range of issues, including self-acceptance, trauma release, managing anxiety, emboldening self-worth, and creative expression. Welcome to the Intuitive Energy Podcast. Today's episode, titled Another Dimension of Astral Projection Part 2, is a continuation of my discussion with Erin Pavlina and Mike Albo, both authors who have written books about astral projection. Today's episode focuses on astral travel and the importance of finding your tribe. Years ago, while I was living in New York City, I had a reopening of my intuitive abilities that I had suppressed from childhood. As the energy kept coming to me, I needed ways to understand how to process it. One of the first resources that was recommended to me was a woman named Erin Pavlina, who's an intuitive counselor, and at the time had a blog with over 100 articles. Her blog now has over 1,000. This blog was so interesting to me because it talked about energetic, spiritual, and esoteric stuff, things like chakras, mediumship, and astral projection. In reading some of the articles, I saw that Erin was teaching a class in a few months, so I spent the next few months reading every article on her blog, every single one. So when the time came, I flew to meet her and spent a week with her and 2 other students learning how to open, awaken, and hone my intuitive skills. That week was really one of the first times I'd been around people that I'd felt accepted and seen, and it started me on my own journey to realize my intuitive skills. One aspect of my intuition is that if I choose to open up to certain frequencies, I can see and sense patterns of energy in and around people and things. One of the ways this skill comes in handy is understanding and editing written texts. This can be a research paper, a business plan, an organizational chart, and my favorite, fiction manuscript. Whether it's a novel or a screenplay, I have an ability to discern and iron out kinks in the plot or minute continuity issues. A term applied to people that read manuscripts to clarify a specific point of view is an authenticity reader. It's particularly enjoyable for me to authenticity read for entertainment that portrays storylines about energy, magic, the occult, and esoteric matters. I believe that by getting it as right as fiction allows, it doesn't take the perceiver out of the storyline, particularly people who are also sensitive and perceive these concepts and ideas on a conscious or subconscious level. So a while back, my friend, New York City Polymathic artist Mike Albo, told me he was writing a novel about teens in the 80s that astral travel, and I offered to read it as an authenticity reader focusing on the ethereal aspects and continuity, a great use of my skill set. I suggested to Mike he read about astral travel from an expert, and I encouraged him to read the Astral Projection Guidebook by my friend and mentor, Erin Pavlina, in order for the astral experience to be described as authentically as fiction allows. He ingested Erin's book wholeheartedly. Which brings us to today's episode. And full disclosure, both guests today are very dear friends of mine, and I am honored to have them both on together talking about their books, which focus on astral projection, but from different perspectives. Well, that leads to an offshoot question. What if you are being perceived? What if something is looking at you and you can sense that you're being looked at? What can you do to sort of negate that or turn that channel off?
There's our shielding techniques that you can use. There's something called the mirror spell, where you imagine a mirror around you, but the mirror faces outwards. So anything that's coming at you is going to only see itself. It's not going to see you. The other thing that you can set up is something that my mentor called guard dogs, which I encountered the first time I went to Astral Project to see him. And there was something with red eyes snarling at me right before I got to his bedroom. And the next day I said, I tried to project to see you, and I feel like I got to your room, but there were these creatures there snarling at me. He's like, and he laughed and he said, you met my guard dogs. And I said, tell me about that. And so I learned how to set up perimeters and stuff. But for the most part, you have to understand that there are a lot of things on the other side that can see us. And you don't want to go through your life wondering did you see that? Did you see that, Grandma? Sorry. You can't live that way. So unless something has evil intent or negative intent, it doesn't bother me if something or someone is looking in on me. What are they going to do?
Yeah, there's a difference between curiosity and malignant energy coming at us. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Also, I wanted to mention that when you go astral, you're kind of a different person. You're sort of at your highest version of yourself. You remember life is not as important as we fear it is sometimes. And so a lot of people say, well, if I could astral project, I would go look at so-and-so in the shower. You don't want to. When you're astral, you're way more mature. But it's different. You don't want to. It's not part of your makeup anymore. It's not something that you would probably desire to do. Could you? Yes. But you're not going to. You're not going to want to. You're going to resist that for the most part. I'm sure you could probably discipline yourself to do or go wherever you're told to go, but that would be wrong.
Yes, in another dimension of us, there is a person who abuses the power. And I just imagined, like with any kind of power, there are people who are just not good people, who might become addicted to it or addicted to the power of it. That's just the way some humans are. But again, this is a fictional version, so I really wanted to explore that a little bit. Just the idea of someone becoming drunk with the power,
That's definitely possible. It's just you really have to be consciously choosing that path, in my opinion, when you're astral. I know a lot of good people, and nobody does that in my sphere, but I do think it's possible. There are really no limits. You can see anything. The other thing is to, sometimes I astral project in my room and I see 5 things in there. Sometimes it's a couple of deceased people, an entity, an energy, and I take a quick look at all of them, friend, not friend, okay. And so then I remove the lower vibrational being, and I don't really bother with the other ones. They can do what they want. A lot of deceased people seem to pass through my room, give me kind of a chin jet of recognition, sup, and just keep moving. I'm like, hey, can I get you a mint or something on your way out? Yeah, you meet all kinds of people, all kinds of energies on the other side. And just like in real life, you don't go walking in a scary neighborhood holding your money out in your hands saying, come and steal from me. You do protect yourself as best you can, and you try not to go where bad things happen.
Well, this is a quote from your book. If you go astral and immediately put yourself in a place of love, gratitude, compassion, joy, and confidence, they will see your light but be unable to reach you.
That is correct. Yes.
And then you refer to the theys as imps, poltergeists, and shadow people. Could you give us some insights on some of those from a non-Hollywood perspective, just to be clear?
Yeah, there are more things on heaven and earth, things we can't fathom. So in my travels, I encountered things that were the equivalent of a bee. A bee might sting me, but it's not trying to kill me. It's not trying to hurt me. It's its nature to sting if it's, encountered with. So I discovered a lot of different kinds of beings out there. And some of them are very powerful and conscious, and some of them are powerful but unconscious. Like a tornado would be powerful but unconscious. It's not trying to destroy your house, but it exists and it's there, and it's going to create some destruction if you interact with it. And so really there should be a catalog of some kind of all of the things you can encounter on the other side and how to deal with them and how to identify them and how to determine which ones can hurt you and which ones won't. But the ones you have to be careful of are the ones that are conscious and powerful. Because just as you are a conscious being on the astral plane traveling around, there are other conscious beings that are also on the astral plane. Some of them are looking to siphon your energy away from you so it can survive. And that's no good. You want to prevent that, but it does happen. I was attacked many times by entities that stole my energy. And it took me a day or 2 or 3 to recover, to get my energy back. But over time, as time went by, I learned how to navigate through the crowd, so to speak, and to change my frequency and to try to really only be on the higher planes.
Navigating through the crowd. I remember when I first came back into my intuitive prowess, going through that crowd and thinking, I don't need most of these judgmental people. They're not even from my era or from my epoch. They were dressed in different clothes. They were dressed in non-modern clothes. So I knew that they may have been there for a reason, but they didn't all have to judge me. Right? I could sort of rise above the ballroom of them.
Yeah. I kind of saw it as being in the cantina in Star Wars.
Yeah. Okay. Similar. Yeah.
You don't want to talk to everyone. Everyone's there for a different reason, and you want to gravitate towards the people and the energies that feel good to you.
In your book, Erin, you refer to them as negative entity attachments, NEA for short.
An attachment is slightly different because when you're astral projecting and you are running around the cantina, so to speak, you're going to encounter beings, but you may have no further interaction with them. But if a being becomes attached to you, it's kind of like it followed you home from the bar and now it's stalking you and it's creeping. So that is going to stay with you. That's going to attempt to influence your thoughts and your actions all day, all night, and you'll start to have bad experiences in life. You'll start to make decisions that maybe aren't in your best interest. You'll start having fights and arguments with somebody you never fought with. You might say something to your boss you would never normally say. It will push on you. It will influence you. And those definitely have to be detached.
And you can do that from the astral perspective?
I try not to do a lot of the detaching. I have a guy for that. Just like you kind of mentioned how you have to empower your client to remove it themselves. In a situation that's dire, where the person's strength is really gone, I do have a friend that will go in and release the attachment and then put up protection and barriers so that that entity cannot reattach, and he can also send it back to the plane it belongs to. That's not my skill set so much.
Yeah, I can do that too. If that's where the client is being led or that entity needs to be somewhere else, there are ways to do that. So I understand from my healing perspective how those things are quite similar. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that different people do different things and have different talents. In my book, there's a young friend who doesn't project astrally, but she's kind of coming into her own as an earth witch, I suppose, a green witch. So she's bound to the earth, but she helps these kids in the astral plane purely through her own experience.
Yeah, so everyone has sort of a different modality and a way of interacting. So yeah, that's good. Yeah, different specialties, just like in the medical profession. You don't have your radiologist give you a cesarean section. Everyone sort of has a specialty that they use. So that's good that you have different characters in the book that express their intuition differently.
Since I know both of you personally, we all share the understanding that the tropes out there in the superhero milieu is more representative of our actual abilities from a minor perspective, just way, way over exaggerated. But yet, why are we as children drawn to these characters? Because a lot of us see ourselves in them, just a hyper fraction of them. But the empathy and the wanting to help others, I think all three of us are drawn to that archetype.
Yeah,
Sure.
and definitely for me, having gone through so many terrifying experiences, I very much wanted to help people who are also going through terror to adjust and alter that path for themselves and go to the higher astral realms where things are much better.
Well, and that's why I do this podcast. I try to talk about things that I didn't understand when I was coming of age and trying to understand what was happening to me. I want to put this all in one place so people can get a taste of it and then go back and find the things that they're drawn to or that speaks to them and say, oh, I want to learn more about that. As I'm not drawn to astral projection, I think it's wonderful that I can bring this perspective into this podcast and show another perspective, just because the entities and things that I deal with are just in the healing milieu. They're just about helping people get past or over them, not share or rise above them to have these wonderful experiences that you both describe in your books. I'd like to hear another story about superseding the physical and experiencing something etheric, but yet you understand it. And how is that different from when I dream the future, what I call a déjà vu? If I have a dream and 3 or 4 months later, that waiter drops his fork at the restaurant, why did I dream that months before? Was I on an astral plane and I went through a loophole or a wormhole and then came back out the other side? I'm not very clear how these things work. So maybe, Erin, you could speak to some of this.
I'm not 100% sure what you're tapping into. I have theories, but I wish I was a quantum physicist. I know that as an intuitive, I can tap into trajectories and possible futures. So I can see possibilities, but then I can tell the person, which outcome do you want of the ones I've just laid out for you? And then I can tell you the steps you can take to achieve that desired outcome. So I'm not like a prediction psychic where I say on, March 3rd, you're going to get sued. It's a trajectory. So being able to tap into something that does eventually happen, you have to think of it as, I feel like, of course, you're going to occasionally tap into something that ends up happening because you noticed that trajectory in your dream or your déjà vu. You tapped into one possibility, and that's the possibility that manifested. Every day, you probably tap into many possibilities that don't happen. So I think it's actually a rare occurrence, totally possible. It's kind of like that saying, a broken clock is right twice a day. You will eventually tap into things that are going to happen. But it could also be, let's just say hypothetically, we're living in a computer simulation. Maybe you've hacked the program for a second. Maybe you saw the module that is being released in the future and you caught a glimpse of it. You received a download of something that was programmed to happen. So I'm not 100% sure, but it's great when it happens.
You make it very clear that dreaming is not astral projection,
Right.
In your book. And then you talk about your journey and talk about how you started with lucid dreaming, but that was just sort of to master being
Awareness.
out of your body. Yeah. I've not been able to astral project myself, but I have very, very weird, vivid dreams that are extremely real to me. And I wonder, this is the drama queen in me, but sometimes I think if it's possible that I'm in a dream, but that some being or some beings are entering the dream state. And if there's a dream state, is that one of the planes, I suppose?
Yes, that's such a great question. And it took me a long time before I had that experience myself, where I started to notice conscious beings in my lucid dream. And I'm like, what the heck? Who invited you to this party? This is my dream, my mental construct, my subconscious. I'm controlling it and it's great. But who are you guys? And I started to realize that dreaming does create some kind of frequency, I call it, that other conscious beings can latch onto and follow back into your dream construct. And that was sort of a frightening situation, to think that something conscious could enter my dream. But I treated it like any astral entity. And if I didn't want it to be there, I woke myself up. They can't keep you in that state because you did start from your own mind, your own mental construct. I've also had some really good conscious encounters in a dream with deceased relatives. It's much easier for a deceased person to communicate with the average person through a dream than to have the person become a medium. So my deceased relatives come to me through dreams all the time and give me information that I know is coming really from them. So they're there with me. They've tapped into my channel, my frequency, and we can communicate with each other consciously. And I'm no longer controlling their actions like they were dream characters. They are their own beings in the dream with me.
For some people, they have this skill like innately, and it can be like the wild, wild west. And then for other people, it's honed or skilled ability that comes to them over diligent time. As you said, you spent, I think, years trying to hone this skill.
Yeah, in hindsight, I realized it took years because I didn't know what I was trying to achieve. I didn't know how it was going to feel, and I didn't know the mechanisms to create it. And so eventually, beings on the other side had to intervene on my behalf and just toss me off the cliff and say, you have wings. Now's a good time to use them. They were waiting for me to jump. Finally, they just, we're going to push you off this cliff. You'll fly, don't worry. But it's terrifying. In terms of the innateness of the ability, I believe that anybody is capable of achieving astral projection, but I do think it's a lot easier for some people than others. Just like we have prodigies in music and sports and stuff like that. Some people will have a natural proclivity towards a certain talent. But I do think with enough hard work and guidance, you can achieve it if you want to.
And an imagination is crucial to the both of you from a creation standpoint, from Mike creating the art and the different artistic endeavors that he does, and Erin just helping your clients, and the way I do too, is tapping into that imagination.
Yeah, the visual, the clairvoyance, and the metaphors. Yeah.
Yeah, the metaphors are the same because I always talk about opening my channels. You're mentioning often frequencies and channels, and I think about when I'm at my most creative, all my channels are open to receive.
Yeah, you're probably also receiving, information, Mike, from your guides and your muses that are conscious beings on the other side who want to send you this material. And when I have written fiction, I just listen. I don't think. Yeah. Just type what I hear them talking in my head, and I type what they're saying. I just type the whole thing as it's given to me. It's actually a lot easier for me to write that way than trying to think, oh, here I should put this plot point. I just let the story unfold as they give it to me.
And that's how I do the authenticity reading. I energetically see the scripts and the words as patterns, because that's my main job, is to see and sense patterns in things. And so when I read these manuscripts, I see and sense the pattern, and when there's a glitch or a hinky moment or a snag, I circle it, and then pages later, sure enough, there's a reason why there was a snag there. I didn't know why when I was reading it. I just said, there's something incongruous here, and I circle it, and then ultimately it comes in later, and I'm able to connect those two things. So yeah, intuition is interesting in the realms of creation and creativity.
Yes. When you mentioned the Bodhi tree in 1998, I lived in Los Angeles at that time, and I went to the Bodhi tree often. And one time I was in the Bodhi tree, and a book fell off the shelf and hit my foot. And I said to my then husband, I'm buying this, whatever it is. And it was called Tales from the Time Loop by David Icke. And I did not know his work prior, but I read it and it was fascinating. And a lot of people think he's a crazy nut job, but he described something in his book that I had experienced and not really even discussed it with many people because it was crazy. But he described it in great detail. And I'm like, damn it, this is real.
Wow.
And I think that book dropped on my foot because I needed to know that a lot of the stuff I was experiencing and happening to me, other people were experiencing too, and that we could talk about it and we could explore it. And
That's amazing.
I was telling Mike earlier, I was reading your book, Under That Castle. I hurt my hip and I couldn't walk the hike. My friend drove me up there and I said, I'm just going to sit here and read.
Yeah.
But I couldn't sit down because my hip hurt. So I was standing up. And I was reading your book about double sight and seeing outside your brain and stuff. And I heard somebody behind me and I was still reading my book, didn't move my body, but my brain turned around and went, oh, that person's wearing yellow. That's not my friend Jennifer. And I kept reading. And 15 minutes later, I'm still reading. And somebody here behind me and I turned, my eyes go behind me, or not my eyes. I said, oh, that person's wearing orange. That's probably Jennifer. And it was. That happened as I was reading your book. That's stuff I keep closed down because I don't want to deal with that during my day. But your book, just being around that energy and that vibration, allowed me to see and sense it in a way that I was like, oh, I remember I can do that. I don't do it so much in my daily life because it's kind of off-putting or can be a little distracting.
Uh-huh.
But when I was in the vibration of reading your book, I was able to see and sense beyond my sight again. And I was like, oh, I forgot I knew how to do that so easily, in my daily life.
Because you're so visual, you're going to have those kinds of intuitive experiences. I have found in my travels, a lot of people don't have the visual capacity. They can't imagine, if I say imagine a tree, they can't.
I just found out that 2.6% of people have absolutely no ability to visualize at all, which I can't even fathom that.
I don't know what I would do if I couldn't see.
Right? Exactly. So any final thoughts?
I always give the same advice to people to keep a notebook and write things down and have your notebook with you at all times. And when I was writing this, I had my notebook by my bed, and a lot of the dreams I had made it into the book. Just keep your work alive and next to you and with you at all times. That's what I want to say.
Okay. And yeah, again, I wrote the book to be a guidebook for people who want to safely explore these other realms. And so if a person is interested in exploring it, reading the book will help you avoid a lot of the pitfalls I fell into early on and help you reach the joys of astral projection much sooner.
Well, and to leave a little teaser from the book, there's achieve separation from your body, explore the astral realms alone or with friends, enjoy mind-blowing astral sex, and protect yourself from dark entities. So if that's not enough of a teaser, I think that's great. So I thank you both very much for being here. How do people find you, Erin?
Website, erinpavlina.com.
As I said, one of the most prolific intuitives I know. And Mike Albo, where do people find your work and your other novels?
You can go to my website, mikealbo.net.
Okay. I highly recommend some of Mike's earlier work. He has some novellas that are quite interesting to read about his experience as a journalist as well as a New York artist. Once again, I thank you both very much for who you are and what you do and what you put out in the world. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, part 2 of another Dimension of Astral Projection. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already, and like and subscribe to this podcast. I thank both Erin Pavlina and Mike Albo for being on today. Be sure to check out their books if these subject matters interest you, or if you have a young adult reader that these books may speak to. Thanks again to Corey Tuck for the music. Be well, and thanks for listening. Visit scottclover.com for more information. Be well, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and solely as a self-help tool for your own use. I'm not providing medical, psychological, or nutrition therapy advice. You should not use this information to diagnose or treat any health problems or illnesses without consulting your own medical practitioner. Always seek the advice of your own medical practitioner and/or mental health provider about your specific health situation. For my full disclaimer, please go to scottclover.com/disclaimer.